The Libertarian State Leadership Alliance presents our 2017 National Conference, The Future of the Libertarian Political Movement. In this panel, Peace Now, End the Warfare State. A panel with Angela Keaton, Will Hopkins, Bill Walker, and Patricia Lee.
Angela.
Oh, okay, thank you. Yes, I do want to start. I want to, hi, everybody. First of all, I want to make a big thank, well, on the camera especially, I want to thank George Phillies for being one of the people in the movement who puts his money where his mouth is, and somebody who's consistently been supporting peace and making anti-war issues at the center of a lot of his projects. So I want to thank George, who just walked through the door just now. Because we have a lot of people in the movement who talk a good game about centering things on nonviolence and not killing people and being against torture and mass murder, things that should not be controversial at all to anyone, anywhere. Oh, thank you.
Is it working?
Oh, is it working? Can you all hear me?
We can hear you normally.
Yeah.
There we go.
Oh, thank you. That nonviolence shouldn't be controversial in the libertarian movement, or specifically the Libertarian Party. The centering of, let's say, something like smaller government would mean inherently less violence, and that should be what, at the very least, we're aiming for. I'm here today with the whole panel. I think this is kind of a reunion panel of sorts. Several years ago, George had this event, very similar event, where we all sat together, and I know for my part today, we're talking about the libertarian movement and the future of anti-war activism. I'm going to pretty much renounce all my strategies of the past 9 years and go in a completely different direction, because what I have been doing hasn't been working. And I'm glad to talk about that, and I hope people challenge me on that. Will?
All right. I'm Will Hopkins. I served in Iraq in 04-05 as a U.S. Army infantryman. Please don't. I am not a libertarian. I run New Hampshire Peace Action. So that's the New Hampshire's largest and only statewide peace group. That being said, being on a footing where you can work with libertarians in the state of New Hampshire is awfully important. You know, when you're working for peace, you've got. I kind of try to cater to the primary constituency that formed New Hampshire Peace Action, which tends to be lefty, progressive peaceniks. But we also have a huge constituency of activists who are out doing important work around peace, who don't agree on a lot of the things that my base seems to have agreement on. So I also have a lot of thoughts going forward on how we work for peace, and I think that a lot of that might depend on you folks who don't identify as lefties, because I think our voice with the current administration is limited, and I think that there might actually be a way that your voice can be heard with the current administration quite differently than it has been for a while. So I'll pass on.
I'd like to quash any optimism along those lines. I don't see that any of us here have any influence whatsoever with the administration. And for that matter, I don't see that the administration has any influence over the actual state apparatus. We could go over that real quick. Let's take some Trump quotes from his campaign. We should stay the hell out of Syria. And you notice that, as Angela's just pointing out, it only took him 8 days after he was inaugurated to come around and just go right with the operations were already planned under the Obama administration, so there's absolutely no change whatsoever. But we're certainly glad that if the people that were quiet for 8 years under Obama decide to start opposing wars, that'll be great. And I'm Bill Walker. I write op-eds and generally make a nuisance of myself.
Hello, thank you. My name is Patricia Lee. I am a libertarian here. I originally came to New Hampshire with a Free State Project, and I've kind of redefined where I am at this point. And I got really upset in 2011 in October when our president was supposed to be for peace. I wasn't an Obama supporter. I've always been libertarian for 30 years, but you know, he started invading Afghanistan in 2011, and yeah, that was really upsetting. I was just going out into the road and holding signs and sign waving, and So I just did something very, very simple. I, wanted to hang on to this libertarian ID and just started this Facebook group called Anti-War New England. I never wanted to, we take a lot of guidance from antiwar.com, and they are our role models. So Anti-War New England was just started just with some Facebook and just trying to organize some of the local activists that are very libertarian and give it a Facebook, forum where we could just come and put our post on there and maybe organize some people that want to come out against the emerging wars that have been continuing, like the Syrian war. We've had two very good, very, very well noted rallies, and some lesser ones too. And we've also had some very good contributions from our president here, Bill Walker, and who also shares that, I don't know, we don't have any presidents, we're kind of libertarian. And Andrew
Andrew Christian is actually president.
Yeah, he is too. And there's just no, we're just trying to encourage contribution. So Bill's written very many good opinion editorials. You can Google Bill Walker, that they got published in some major papers on the East Coast, and we're very happy about that. So we're also there just locally as a refuge for those of us who feel really marginalized by the state of the foreign policy and all these recurring wars. So the most recent, like the Moab and all this stuff going on. And it seems like we've actually emboldened the ISIS groups. And we can go on about that. And I'm not going to I just want to talk again about. So we're just trying to encourage discussion. And if you look at us on Facebook, we're a repository for your posts. We really would like you all to join up as members. And we're very independent. We are not allied with any other group. Anti-War New England is very singular. We're not fundraising. And we're also trying not to be ethnocentric. We're trying to get out of our little tribal things and really make friends and get to know some of these people from these other countries. And that's been one of my most rewarding experiences, and actually getting to host some really cool Muslim folks, in this area. And that's part of it too, and we've attracted some really great people. On the other hand, we also attracted some ISIS folks that Andrew got on and kicked off, and I applauded that, and we had to block them. So, we are kind of picky, and we also have attracted very many lefty people types that have really wanted to kind of hijack. And so I'm really want to watch that we always watch our libertarian origins, that we are all about upholding very fundamental rights of individual liberty and individual private property rights. And if we're not doing that, then we should just break up. But that's our fundamental, we basically are libertarian anti-war New England. And we are also not doing conspiracy mongering or any of this, that stuff. I've really spent a long time on a lot of these conspiracies and found, to my dismay, I think we've lost a lot of people that went really crazy on a lot of that, and they are not showing up for any of the real stuff where we really are talking about real facts, verifiable things that are going on that sound like they should be conspiracies that actually are crazy and are real, so you have to kind of vet all that stuff too. So I'm going to stop. Thank you very much. I'm very honored to be here. Anti-War New England Facebook. Hope you all sign up. Okay?
Oh, wonderful.
So let's keep going. Any questions or?
Sure. I'm going to say, I've been on antiwar.com officially for 9 years, and I'm going to say what hasn't worked for me. This doesn't mean these are things that are not going to work for anyone else. They may be better tactics used in more skillful hands, but this is where I have failed. And there are several strategies when people talk about politics. You know, there's influencing elites, you know, people who are in high places in journalism, academia, professional class, they're very rich, influencing normal human beings, and then what you do as a grassroots activist. This is what does not work for me. I have tried this. Peace appeals based on the economics of war. There's so much good work done by people in Cato Foreign Policy and at George Mason University and other libertarian adjacent groups on how much war costs. I mean, it has horrible, horrible costs. Just our bases overseas just cost us $156 billion. Our military costs are something like $600 billion. But I've never convinced anyone on the basis that war is horrible on how much the F-35 costs. I get glazed over. There are two things that make people's eyes glaze over. One is economics, the other, of course, is foreign policy. And when you combine those together, at least when I do, I end up losing my audience. I don't know who the audience for that is for, really, because the kind of people who are wonky enough to think that way have a whole different way of looking at the world that I might as well try with a different issue just by being anti-tax. That would just be a simpler thing. Peace appeals based on constitutionality. This also only works for a very small group of people, and those people tend to be the kind of people who would vote for Ron Paul, and they don't really need to be convinced about the evils of war. They're already on board. I have never had anyone say to me, you know, you're right. Those wars sound really unconstitutional. Just clearly, for me, ineffective. And also, too, because the constitutional issue doesn't work because people almost always defer to the president on matters of war and peace. No matter how horrible they think he is, no matter how dumb they think he is, suddenly he, and it's still a he, they think that he must know more than we do. He must have lots of new facts. I mean, apparently they also must live in an alternative moral reality where killing children is also acceptable. Peace appeals based on classical liberal or small government dogma. And I know a lot of us, all of us in these various rooms here, into varying ways. If we're not libertarians, we tend to be kind of attached to certain ideals. I have never, you know, no one is convinced to be against the war because you put up a meme of a George Washington quote about defense. No, the founding fathers do not work in peace appeals. No one joins the anti-war movement because they get excited about something Thomas Jefferson said. And to be quite honest, we're in a period of our libertarian history where we need to maybe distance ourselves a bit from the founding fathers and maybe rethink how we do that. Adam Smith's Wealth of Nations actually does have a really great critique against colonialism, but it's Adam Smith, and it's based on a time when he's really just talking about very pragmatic approaches to why empires shouldn't have colonies. And this next one is, with all due respect to a lot of my colleagues at antiwar.com. For those who know his history, we know there's a long history of the anti-war right. That there's actually a lot of anti-war movements in the history of the U.S. that were not attached to what we perceive as hippies or leftists or whatever in our mind keeps us from being in the anti-war movement. That it just doesn't work. No one cares who Robert Taft is. No one really wants to know the history. These things just don't. The anti-war right of years ago has very little to do with the various right-wing groups in the U.S. today. It's not an appeal that really works. Pleading that the USA should not be the world's policeman. No, most people really do want the US to be the world's policeman. They like booms and kabangs and bombs, and spy novels and shows like Homeland are popular for a reason, and Americans love cops. I mean, at least Americans who are not from the demographics who are constantly abused by cops. Blowback theory doesn't work either, because the only narratives anyone ever hears are the ones on Fox, CNN, MSNBC. So it's very, very confusing how to give anyone context unless you start all the way from the beginning. And where is the beginning? 1991, 1956, 1776. It's very difficult. And also, here in North America anyway, it's very difficult. We have a very difficult time imagining that people in other countries have volition and emotions. Like, we don't seem to understand that, let's say, Pakistani mothers get upset when their children die. That seems to be difficult, somehow a difficult concept for people in North America. It may be true of everyone. We all may be that way, but it seems like it's something that particularly hits here. And then finally, for years, what I have focused on is hoping that we can build a grassroots mass movement. It has not worked. I have failed on that. In terms of my role in the libertarian movement to try to help build a grassroots movement, I have not at all been successful. And I've done a lot of rethinking about what should be done, and that will be the next part. If everyone doesn't get mad at me for what I just said.
A lot of good food for thought. On the, when you talk about like building, the anti-war movement and being kind of, a united front, which is a lot of what I think we're talking about. So bringing my demographic and your demographic, and I do want to say, don't be so hard on yourself. My demographic is not all that welcoming. This is, a simple reality is that when I look at my board or I look at my membership, I have a group of people who are really, they like to view politics on a left and right spectrum, and libertarian is far right, and therefore all that is wrong. And the idea that not only that we should be working with libertarians, but that we really need to be developing the folks who are against war because they understand the financial costs, because they are supportive of smaller government and government waste. I mean, you talk about the F-35 and people's eyes glazing over, and it's baffling that people's eyes glaze over because we're talking about the largest pork project in the history of mankind. $1 trillion over 10 years for a plane that finally flies, but 7 years behind schedule was still not off the ground. Faulty engine housings, and we finally have had missions that have been flown by it, but at the cost of hundreds of billions of dollars for single missions that weren't all any more successful than other versions of that aircraft would have been. And so I do think don't be hard on yourselves because the left we're some prickly folks. And beyond that, I mean, these are things I kind of feel like you're where I found myself a year or two in, like, well, we elected our guy, Obama, and we had 2 surges in Afghanistan to the effect of almost tripling the number of ground troops. We had, in the first 2 years of the Obama presidency, more civilian casualties in Afghanistan than all of Bush's years put together. We had, a myth of a decreasing Pentagon budget that was happily accepted by both major political parties. And it was, if you ran the numbers, there was a bit of a leveling off, but it never went down as far as what we were spending on the Pentagon. I don't. You talked about legal arguments, and in particular, when you look at the recent bombing of an Assad-controlled airfield. So blatantly illegal on so many levels. I mean, you can go back to the Constitution and talk about congressional authorization for war, but you can also go to Article 6, where we say we're going to make any ratified treaty supreme law of the land. And the United Nations Charter is very, very clear about when you can attack a member state of the United Nations. And that's not to say that when Obama was attacking Al-Qaeda or ISIS or Al-Shabaab in the 9 different countries he bombed during his presidency, that was legal. But he wasn't directly attacking a member state. He was attacking somebody who there was some semblance of a War Powers Act that covered it. And when Trump bombed the airfield and has continued to do that, there's been no discussion of the legality of that. And it's so clearly a violation of Article 6 of the Constitution. Even if you bypass that Congress has a responsibility for oversight and say, well, the War Powers Act kind of rewrote that, which you can't do that without a constitutional amendment, but whatever. If you accept that legal argument, there's just no way to make attacking Assad at this point legal. The reality of Syria, we all like to believe that, or not we all, but the general public likes to believe that that it's just too complicated to understand. And sure, there are 3 or 4 different groups in Syria doing work, okay, 8 different groups in Syria, but realistically, at this point, there are 2 primary axes of power that could feasibly take control of the country. One being al-Nusra and ISIS. You think 4, okay. One being, and I'll turn the mic right over so you can explain that, but in my mind, you've got Assad, backed by Russia, and you've got ISIS, al-Nusra, the Wahhabi alliance, backed by Saudi Arabia and the US, and I think the possibility of another axis of power taking military control there is absurd. And the US has empowered al-Nusra, we've directly funded al-Nusra, we maybe have directly funded ISIS, and I think that there's a standing agreement among the folks from the State Department and Pentagon, although they have funded different groups that have sometimes fought each other, that the Wahhabi axis of power is the one we want taking over. That essentially we want al-Qaeda and ISIS to, in the end, control Syria. And that we are kind of passively funding and arming and making sure that those weapons find their way into the hands of the Sunni axis of power. I think if Americans began to grasp that that has been our role, that ISIS is there, not only because there are traumatized people who have been bombed and lost family members and are really pissed off at the West, but also because we're making sure that they have lots of guns to destabilize Syria and go after Assad, people might start to be more interested in deconstructing the political system we have and building something new that maybe works in our interest instead of the interest of those funding campaigns. So I'm going to turn it over so that you can disagree with that.
Yeah, Bill Walker. I agree. I agree we shouldn't beat ourselves up because we aren't printing ourselves billions of dollars to use for our massive media campaigns that we don't have. And nowhere in this room are the world's 1,042 billionaires to help us out here, even though theoretically they should be more concerned about the world being burned up by nuclear fire than we are, because they theoretically have lives they would wish to protect. So we're pretty much stuck using memes to fight our battles. We can't outspend people. This goes back to why we have large central powers in the world in the first place, which from the beginning of the 20th century has mostly been the story of central banks. Hopefully the crypto people will change us around, and people will start being able to keep some of their money, and you won't have situations like Venezuela where the government can just take 100% of the civil society's resources and lose it all. So crypto is, Bitcoin type systems are one hope for the future that will get us more decentralized. Decentralization is key to peace. If you look at the countries that have succeeded in staying out of wars, they're the ones that don't have a president and can get out of bed one day and have their army go do something. The Swiss, nobody here knows the name of the Swiss president.
No.
No, and why would you? They can't do that. They cannot just get out of bed one day and grab their football and put in a code and have the Swiss blow someone away. The Swiss put their efforts into protecting their civilians and decentralizing their army and making it impossible for it to be taken out from the top. In fact, even if somebody did take the top, it wouldn't affect it. The Germans tried. The Germans put a lot of effort into trying to figure out how to take Switzerland, and they eventually concluded it could not be done because there was no center place to attack. They could take any one particular thing, but that didn't matter to the whole system. And that's how successful, peaceful, long-term stability occurs, is when you have severe decentralization. And that's how successful movements work. If you had a large centralized peace movement, the leadership would quickly be corrupted or subverted or whatever. You just can't. We can't build pyramids to oppose the other pyramids. It has to be bottom up. It has to be driven by small individual groups. When there was a large anti-war movement in the United States in between World War I and World War II, the groups were very decentralized. The America First group had 480 local chapters for its 800,000 members. There hasn't been a peace movement, and remember, the population was a lot smaller back then too. So there hasn't been a peace movement of that size since then. They also used a lot of humor back in the interwar period. There was a group called Veterans of Future Wars that was started by a group of Princeton students, and they got up to 80,000 members in between the wars. So it all has to be bottom up, spread out, and the memes are very important. And where I would suggest starting with the memes is we go back to the root of, you could kind of piggyback on the pro-war memes, because the pro-war memes all depend on the evil enemy. You have to have this vicious enemy. And the counter to the various vicious enemies is, gee, where did the vicious enemy get their uranium? So, North Korea, for instance. You can Google this up. It was a front page article in 1994 in the New York Times. Clinton signs a bill that gave the North Koreans 2 nuclear reactors, a bunch of uranium. They never turned the reactors on. They just put the uranium straight into bombs. It also gave them a few $1 billion, and we continue to aid the North Koreans to this day. So this is the sort of thing that causes a lot of cognitive dissonance, and which is why it's never in the major media. But this is the kind of thing you can get out and actually have some effect and change some minds with, when people realize that the enemy they're afraid of is being funded, or in the case of Saudi Arabia, technologically and C3-wise controlled by the U.S. The U.S. is, even though the Saudis are quote-unquote paying for the weapons, we just gave them that $110 billion deal. They're giving us oil for the weapons, but whenever they actually try to use the weapons, it ends up being our advisors and our control and our surveillance data that is used to tell them who to attack. So for all practical purposes, the Saudi army is just part of us, part of Skynet. It's not like the Saudis have some way of making their own policy. The U.S. is apparently okay with a large part of the Middle East going Wahhabi. The odds of us ever getting people to study history are very low, but for ourselves it's useful to go back and read Lawrence of Arabia. If you read Lawrence of Arabia's 7 Pillars of Wisdom, one of the main points in 7 Pillars of Wisdom is the Wahhabis are nuts. Do not give them anything. At the time, they only had 6 oases. They had 6 backwoods oases, and as far as Lawrence was concerned, that was 6 too many. But some guy from India came in who didn't know anything about the Middle East, gave Ibn Saud a bunch of rifles and gold, and Saud then committed one of the 20th century's democides, killed half a million people or something in 1 year. It was significant. It's a big enough genocide that it ends up in Rummel's democide pages on his University of Hawaii site. So this demonization of Islam should be a demonization of U.S. intelligence agencies, because Wahhabism did not exist in any significant form in 1918, but Western weapons and money built it up, and now the U.S. is continuing the British work to build it up even more, so that the more modernizing factions of Sunniism and Shiitism are being subsumed into this huge worldwide Wahhabi movement, which is driven by Saudi money. So, well, we could go on about that forever, but just I guess the take home here is we want to go after the root of the problem, and the root of the problem is U.S. intervention. When the U.S. goes in somewhere, picks the very worst faction it can find, gives them 100 times as much money and weapons as anyone around them, then you end up with ISIS, and you end up with the people in Nigeria, the Boko Haram types that ended up with the weapons from the Libyan invasion, which somehow has dropped out of the news, even though that's still, the civil war there is still going on. And that was another, if we're going to talk constitutionalism, completely illegal. We just attacked Libya, bowled out of the blue, no reason whatsoever, and then we made sure we took all the weapons that the Russians had stored there during the Cold War, and we handed them out to all sorts of interesting groups, and now those weapons are in Syria, they're in half of Africa, thus excusing us for building more bases in Africa and expanding more drone operations in Africa. So the whole cycle continues. Every time the U.S. gives $1 billion in arms to a radical group somewhere, it's the excuse for $100 billion in arms to try to counter it after it spreads out and is hidden and used to strike at the roots of civil society everywhere. So that would be there's a lot more we could say about goals, but in the short term, that's what we can do with the resources we have, is we can just piggyback on the pro-war memes. And that was what the veterans of future wars did in the 30s. They were piggybacking on a large popular meme that was being driven by a veterans organization. They were trying to get their World War I bonus paid early. So they had this nationwide campaign, and so people were just, it's just a advertising technique. If you have a small budget, you have to piggyback on the other guy's budget. So I guess that's all my only practical thing, unless someone here just did make a few $1 million in the Bitcoin rise last week, in which case I could go farther with some more expensive ideas. Oh, tell them about the first couple protests you did, and that the Syrian woman that stopped.
Here, you tell them.
Oh, okay.
This is like their.
Yeah, just.
It was cool.
Yeah, she has done a couple of protests in Manchester that were covered by WMUR and other media. So it's very cost effective. You get 30 or 40 people. Most people just never get off their couch. So if you even get 40 people to get up and wave signs, that's news, at least in Manchester.
With press releases that Bill did.
So, and Andrew did a very good job of notifying
right.
the press earlier and actually, getting them there.
Yeah, it is.
There's very little crime in New Hampshire. So little, the news usually has nothing to cover. So if you give somebody a couple days warning, they'll cover your protest. And they'll also, talk about your press releases and stuff. And you can get op-eds in the paper fairly easily too, everywhere except the paper where I live, but everywhere else. The very first protest she did, a Syrian woman was driving by in front, and the Syrian stopped her car, parked it, got out, and came over and joined the protest. Because she said, I came to the U.S. because I'm anti-Assad. I hate Assad. But what you guys are doing is not helping get rid of Assad. It's just making random destruction. It has absolutely no help whatsoever to Syria. And that was in 2014, so I guess she was right.
She became a celebrity on MUR that evening.
Any more comments or thoughts?
I'd like to just open it up to you all too. If I'd like to kind of go with discussion and just start where you all are thinking too, and like to hear the candidates' view too on how they can promote anti-war platforms in their candidacy. I think with political candidates often open up, this discussion and to these other narratives that, like ours, that are never heard on the Fox News and sources like that. That the candidates.
I have actually a simpler concept of it, which is, since I don't think I can get the average person to understand who's funding whom and where the money came from, or to your point, to study history.
Yeah, that's not happening.
Yeah. So since I don't think that's going to work, I think my idea is relatively simple. We've spent 13 to 14 years at war. Maybe it's time to just walk away. Mm-hmm. Maybe it's time to just realize it's not going to work. And to do what the moral thing would be is to allow people in the Middle East to have their own civil war, to have their own revolution, to decide to have their own kind of government any way they decide to make that happen. And if that happens to be violent, then it is. If it's not, that's okay too. Canada became independent without war. We became independent with war.
Well, guaranteed the explosions would be smaller if we weren't sending them $110 billion to the Saudis.
And the other thing I say also is us being involved actually makes people who should surrender keep fighting.
Right.
There are some people who just should surrender already.
Yeah, that's the Syrian thing where we're helping all these different factions, all the different factions inside al-Nusra. Even if al-Nusra walked into the capital tomorrow, there's still several factions, and the war would continue because whichever faction is weakest, we reinforce it, and the war just never ends.
And there's a second piece that people don't really understand. We're at a point to where no matter what we do, the war keeps going. Us helping isn't helping, it's just making it go longer.
Bigger explosions.
Yes.
One of the things that come out of that position, though, is so what do we do with refugees? Mm-hmm. And I think the libertarian thing of, allowing a person to just be thought of not as what state they were born in, but them as an individual and be able to travel and make contracts and to make their way of life, and without all these big state mechanisms that,
That's almost impossible for Americans to accept.
I know it. That's just huge.
I mean, I agree with what you're saying, but the American psyche is us versus them. The American psyche is still no, foreigners are taking my jobs.
Yeah,
The psyche is still there. We have to break it to a point where we have to at least, we could probably have a liberal immigration policy, and that might be acceptable to see how that works. Maybe in that regard, perhaps. I mean, what we're missing is, and this is on a separate side, but we're missing in that we're educating a bunch of people who are non-Americans, and then because since 9/11, our policy is sending them all home. And they want to stay, and they want to start businesses here, but now they're starting them in India, they're starting them in China. We're creating Silicon Valleys in other countries because we won't let them stay here to build
That's
ours.
right.
And it's all because of, I'm afraid of someone taking my job. Not realizing that the guys who are actually going to make the jobs are the guys who just got out of MIT.
Right.
the
Yeah,
labor
I-
unions are big special interests and
Yes.
the
Absolutely.
mouthpiece of our
So it's a big
congressman.
issue that we have. Our
Yeah.
colleges aren't working. There's so many problems internally, that all those problems internally make it hard for us
Special
to have a
interest.
foreign policy that makes any sense.
One thing you can say about the refugees, I think, is simple enough to get across is if we were not shoving large amounts of heavy weapons into these conflicts, then you wouldn't have to have everyone leave to make room for the war.
Yes.
And this is, I know people don't know history, but this should not be that complicated because Americans should be vaguely aware. There was a place called Vietnam that
Yep.
had a couple million refugees come out
Yes.
of it. And that was because we bombed it with 7 million bombs. We blew up all the villages in Laos. We blew up all the villages in Cambodia. Not only did this not win the war, it caused communist movements. Okay, now we're into history again, and they won't know any of that. But
No, but
but the
this-
general concept of bigger war makes more refugees, I think that's something
There's a
you
more
should be able to
important Vietnam
convey.
issue. That is, we walked away from Vietnam, and 20 years later, we were trading partners.
Yes.
That's the bigger issue.
Yeah,
Just
yeah,
straight.
that's good.
We walked away from Vietnam. We lost that war.
Right.
We walked away from it. And when we walked away, 20 years later, we're trading partners.
Right.
And that's the critical piece to understand. Not just that, they told us during Vietnam, if we lost Vietnam, the entire world will become communist. Remember
Right,
that?
right.
Domino effect, the whole world will become communist. They're telling us if we lose the Middle East, the whole world will become, a caliphate.
Caliphate, right.
No, that's didn't happen in Vietnam, won't happen here. I think Vietnam is a very good analogy that we can use here.
And Laos and Cambodia, same thing. Now we're trading with them, and now that we've stopped bombing all the villages in the area, they capitalized, and they're fine.
Yes, and we
Yeah.
talk so often about how, yes, but, bombing works. We dropped more bombs in Vietnam than all of World War II, and we still lost that.
Yeah, 7 million tons.
Yes, more
That's
than
a
World
lot
War
of
II, and we
bombs.
still lost that war. Bombing does not work.
Bombing does not work. That should actually. I hope that you repeat that line.
I do often.
Yeah, that's
Yes.
that's a good one.
Yes.
Yes, sir.
And have you had success with offering the opposite side of the coin? So instead of talking about the costs, talking about what are the benefits if we hadn't spent that money on bombing? If we had, say, let's spend half of that on paying down our debt or deficit, and half of it on infrastructure or whatever. I mean, if people had seen what could we have gotten if we hadn't spent that on? Have you had any success with that?
It's always the great strategy that I loved about Ron Paul, where we talk about what would we be doing with that money. He's somewhat of someone you don't hear about much anymore because he's like a typical congressman. He's had all the scandals, but Alan Grayson used to say the war is making you poor. The idea that a lot of our problems, now pretending let's remember not in a libertarian context, just like everything is the same except we pull back on the empire. There probably would, in theory, be more wealth for infrastructure, a different discussion maybe about what healthcare would look like. Because the money, and I know this is controversial because we want to, as libertarians, believe that all the money that goes away is about entitlements, but the empire's long-term costs are sucking us dry, and not just morally, but the actual literal wealth is going on. War does not create wealth, no matter what. I mean, it does something for Lockheed, but it doesn't do anything for the rest of us.
No, it does create jobs, though. It does create jobs. And there's an issue. Libertarians are often this. Libertarians often say, government doesn't create jobs. Well, when I'm getting that paycheck for my government job, that's a job. That's how I see it, the individual. And remember, the government is the largest employer in the country. Bigger than Walmart. More people work for government than work for Walmart. It's the largest employer in the country. About 14% of all our jobs are government jobs, give or take in an area. So government does create jobs. So those bombs, someone's got to build them. Someone's got to make those tanks that sit in New Hampshire, Arizona, and being wasted in Arizona, Nevada.
Just down Massachusetts for Raytheon, all those companies right along going into
Yes.
Boston, yeah.
So it's not so easy to give that message when probably I know someone who's getting a government check. Probably everyone in this room knows someone who's getting a government check.
Right, well, here we're...
Hard to do that.
here we're back into the people don't want to learn history or economics, but
Yes.
obviously every defense job is removing 4 other jobs, and those 4 other jobs actually make stuff.
Yes.
Like
Correct.
cancer cures or who knows what.
Agreed.
But yes, you can't see the stuff that was destroyed by the government program. You only see the government program.
Right.
I think we can borrow a little bit from sometimes the good part of the liberal people, who, those people, some of whom that are not part of the central organizations, but are the workers, you know, those some good people there that are very intolerant to this prejudice against brown people in other countries, you know, and it's just given them a hard time. And then Trump, I think Trump got a lot of success from exploiting a lot of that, you know, kind of very poor mentality. And that, you know, like that, you know, anti-war New England is all about tolerance, these people, and like making friends with them, you know? So we don't have to be really smart either and know all this stuff about history, but just get out and talk to some people.
Well, I'm from New York City, and
Oh,
you're also
yeah.
from New York City, right? And
Okay.
we know, I'm sure, you know, we know people who are from Egypt, people who are from Saudi Arabia, people from Iraq, Afghanistan. You know,
Yeah.
they have carts on the street, they're making money,
Right.
they're driving cabs, they're doing Uber, they're taking all
Right.
kind of jobs. And
Right.
if you look at what's happened in that area, we know that the people in the Middle East actually don't hate Americans. They hate the American government.
Right,
They love Americans. They don't hate us, they want to be us, right? They want to come here, they stand in line for hours to embassies trying to get visas to come here.
right,
And who are the people in New York City who stopped the most recent terror attacks? They're Muslims
right,
who said something's wrong, right? Now I'm a Muslim and I've got a girl in college and I got somebody else, you know, a job going, my son's got you know, he's going to his new job. I don't want to ruin things.
right.
So yeah, I'm gonna tell, right? I'm more American now than I am Saudi. I'm more American now than I am Egyptian, insert thing here. And this is the value here. They'd rather be here than there. Our culture is far more powerful than any bomb we could ever make. It's not even close. Far more powerful.
Yes.
We don't have an exact study on who voted for Trump why, but when I was doing this op-ed on Trump's stated policy before he was inaugurated, there's 50-some tweets specifically about Syria, every single one of them severely anti-interventionist. And, you know, so there's at least some of his votes were specifically because he was taking the anti-interventionist vote away from the Libertarians. And then forgot it immediately as soon as he got in. But anyway, it didn't hurt him, you know.
Yeah, people I think did think that Hillary was the warmonger.
Hillary
Right.
has always supported the wars, so yeah, I mean, it was a good point he could make until 8 days after he was in.
Hi, Max. Welcome to
How are
our
you?
panel discussion.
Sorry.
This is Max Abramson.
Former state representative. There was a rule about two-party politics, that the out party is always the peace party and
Yeah.
the in party is always for war. And
Yeah.
Hillary made this mistake of being the in party. She was for war, so she was part of the establishment. And Trump very
Was the out
cleverly
party.
and craftily, because Obama was the president, people tended to view the Democrats as being in power. So he took the anti-establishment route and, of course, promoted peace. Nixon did the same thing in '68, but we saw how that turned out.
Does anyone remember, there was a foreign policy advisor for Trump that was working in the Trump campaign, and he was, I think he was an Egyptian or some Middle Eastern, and he was great. I was listening to him on the radio, and I was like really agreeing with him, and he was like in the early stages of the Trump campaign.
Yeah. I mean, there's
And then, like, they replaced him, I guess.
every Republican.
He's certainly not Secretary
Yeah.
of State.
Right,
Going back to
right,
Eisenhower, who's won an election, has put in some kind of libertarian talking points,
right,
including Eisenhower. And actually, the last American president who used the word libertarianism, libertarian philosophy in a positive light, before he got elected was Ronald Reagan. And Ronald Reagan didn't just sweep, was it 49 states or 47 states? He was the first Republican to win the South solidly, and he picked up a lot of cities. He won 45% of the vote in New York City. He won about 45% of the gay vote. He picked up all these completely non-traditional groups just by, you know, using a lot of libertarian talking points. Now, when he got in, he delegated to a lot of neocons, and that was a problem. But we've seen again and again and again, in inner suburbs, in the cities, in college towns, among young voters, among the working poor, that kind of libertarian message of live and let live, leave others alone and not doing anything to us.
and then they hijack us, and many of us kind of go to their side, like what happened in the Trump campaign. that I saw observed here in New Hampshire.
Well, the reason I promote LibertyBallot.com,
Nobody in this room.
the reason I promote LibertyBallot.com amongst all my friends is what I no longer care what letter you put after your name. We used to have a whole Libertarian wing of the Democratic Party, kind of John F. Kennedy, Mike Gravel, Dennis Kucinich wing is pretty much gone. And they were basically libertarians, but they tended towards Democrat working class economics. But there was a whole libertarian wing at one time. And now there's still a small libertarian wing within the Republican Party. But as far as I'm concerned, you're either voting to protect the Constitution and protecting people's constitutional rights, or you're not. And I don't care what letter you put after your name anymore.
Only one letter does that, though, that's the problem.
That's right.
Only the L does that.
Only the L has done
letters
that.
talking, but don't do it.
That's
Well,
right.
there's a few. There's Tulsi Gabbard.
Not a precedent.
Tulsi
Yes.
Gabbard is one Democrat,
So
and then
4 out of 5
there's probably
35. That means
20 Republicans that are at least semi-anti-intervention.
Not any DC
But
That's
pretty
just
small.
stretching.
Not any big power
Yeah,
force.
it's also-
You're stretching, my friend. You're stretching.
It's also, in the State House, out of 240 Republicans, actually 220 showing up. Out of 220 in the New Hampshire State House, New Hampshire's a little different.
Yeah, New Hampshire's different.
All of New England is like this, though. Out of 220 who showed up consistently, about 145 to 150 were consistently supporting the less government, more freedom approach. In fact, I don't have the scorecards with me, but in the New Hampshire State House, the average Democrat had NHLA scores of anywhere from about 5% to somewhere as high as 40%. Most were on the 20% range. Republicans were anywhere between 40% and 100%. We have about 50 or 60 Liberty Republicans in the New Hampshire State House, and most of the rest already lean that way. So New England conservatives almost a libertarian already.
Yes.
Yeah, and the state does matter. I mean, state level stuff matters a lot, because if you get the education system more free, then that allows more good memes into the system. If you get rid of the drug war, that gets rid of a lot of the potential for black ops. Have to give Netflix a lot of credit. They have a nice anti-Afghan war series or show, maybe just show, with Brad Pitt, unfortunately, but otherwise, very good.
Brad Pitt.
Believe me, you watch this, you will say, gee, why didn't they get somebody besides Brad Pitt? But the writing's very good. And the first thing they do is they show that Pitt's supposed to be McChrystal, and he's showing up for the 2011 surge. And so he shows up, and the first outpost they take him to, it's all surrounded by poppies. And he goes, why are we growing opium? And they go, well, Congress says can't grow cotton because it competes with American products. So they grow this, and then they don't shoot at us. And then they just cut and go on, and that's absolutely how it is.
But in New Hampshire, you look at New York, it's a very different state. I mean, the Democrats in New York State are communists, and the Republicans are socialists. I mean, that's kind of how it works in New York State. It's a different issue. I think state by state's a big point. I mean, New Hampshire has a different world, right? A New York Republican is not a Utah Republican.
And there's differences of opinion between the different levels about who controls what. The feds are still claiming that they run the drug war, but you notice they don't, because they don't have the meme power to go into California and say, okay, we're going to drag you all off. They just don't. It would probably bring them down. So sometimes good things can happen at the state level.
We've got time for one more question before we get thrown out of here.
Hey, Will, what's your success been with reaching out to veterans? Have you used different strategies for kind of left or more conservative literature? How do you tactically handle that?
Yeah, and that's a great question. I was on the National Board of Vets for Peace for a while, and especially in New Hampshire. I mean, like, you want to know what my successful strategies are, and they don't exist. And part of that is that in New Hampshire, most of the anti-war vets who are here are libertarian, figure out what peace action is, and don't really want to work with me. That being said, they're organizing, and we'll sometimes talk together. But I haven't, Peace Action doesn't primarily organize vets. And as a board member of Vets for Peace, I would say I was not successful in bringing in new folks. So I should be the right person to answer that question, but all I've got is that, in New Hampshire, there are a lot of anti-war vets. Most of them are here as part of the Free State Project, or they're libertarian, and they're not folks who I've had a lot of success organizing. That being said, that doesn't mean they're not organizing. It doesn't mean that there isn't work being done, that there aren't folks gathering, but they're doing it at the Quill in Manchester, they're doing it in Keene, and I'm not, I'm not part of it, which is, it's not to say I don't have a good working relationship with those folks. It's just to say that it hasn't been a place where I've been as strong as I would like. There's a
We'll
lack.
certainly
And on
have to
that,
invite
and
you
on
all
that
to our
note,
rallies.
and on that note, there's the email, so anytime you guys are doing anything,
Yeah.
we'll certainly help promote it.
Yeah, I wouldn't look to some of those.
When she was talking about kicking social stuff, what he was doing,
Yeah.
he was pushing the North Korean nukes as a good thing.
Oh,
Not very good for an anti-war page.
Right.
This was an education policy.
I just had to address that
This guy
yesterday.
was just some sort of raving leftover Stalinist,
Yeah,
not any sort of.
thank you, thank you.
We have a couple more minutes if there is one more question. Mr. Jingosian seems to have disappeared, so we are going to move everyone into there, which is also where lunch will be served.
Oh.
And there will be one panel on protecting the LP from the alt-right and other Nazis.
And lefties, should be.
Nazis are technically lefty.
Yeah.
Well, I'm quite sure.
The Libertarian State Leadership Alliance presents